The dust-laden wind carried desperate pleas through the open windows of the Malad City, Idaho stagecoach office, as Ruby Vance clutched the telegram that had changed everything. "I'll take them," she declared to the station manager, her voice steadier than her trembling hands. "My sister's children will not be sent to an orphanage while I draw breath." It was 1875, and Ruby had barely been scraping by on her late husband's homestead for the past year. At 26, widowhood had thrust her into a solitary existence she hadn't anticipated when she'd followed Thomas west with dreams of building a future together. Now, with her sister and brother-in-law claimed by the influenza that had ravaged Denver, 4 orphan children were headed her way on tomorrow's stage. Ruby walked out into the fierce summer sun, mentally cataloging the meager supplies in her cupboard. The small plot of land Thomas had claimed under the Homestead Act lay 5 miles outside of town, 160 acres of promise that had withered under drought conditions and Ruby's inexperience. The modest cabin he'd built with such hope now sagged at one corner, the roof in desperate need of repair before autumn rains arrived. "Miss Ruby," called Martha Jenkins from the general store porch, "you look like you're carrying the weight of the territory on those shoulders." Ruby managed a wan smile. "My sister and her husband passed. The children are arriving tomorrow." Martha's hand flew to her mouth. "Lord have mercy, how many?" "4. Oldest is 10, youngest just turned 3. Ruby swallowed hard. "I need to prepare, on credit." Martha asked gently, knowing Ruby's situation as well as everyone in the small community did. "Just until harvest," Ruby said, though they both knew her struggling wheat crop might not yield enough to cover existing debts, let alone new ones. Martha nodded anyway. "Come on in. We'll figure something out." An hour later, Ruby loaded the wagon with bare necessities: flour, beans, coffee, sugar, and a bolt of fabric to make clothing for the children. The debt ledger in Martha's store had grown by another page, but Ruby couldn't allow herself to dwell on it. She needed to prepare the cabin. The journey home seemed longer than usual, the weight of responsibility bearing down harder than the August sun. Thomas had been gone 15 months now, taken by a kick from a horse they couldn't afford to buy but had needed desperately. Ruby had learned to manage alone, to fix what she could, to go without what she couldn't afford, to endure. But 4 children. How would she feed them all winter? How would she tend the land while caring for them? As the wagon crested the final hill, Ruby caught sight of an unfamiliar horse tethered at her fence post. A tall figure was examining her cabin's roof, hat tipped back to reveal sun-bronzed features. She pulled the wagon to a halt, wariness edging her voice. "Can I help you?" The man turned, and Ruby noted his worn denim pants, cotton shirt with sleeves rolled to reveal muscled forearms, and the quiet confidence with which he moved. A cowboy by the look of him, though not one she recognized from nearby ranches. "Madam," he greeted, removing his hat. His eyes were startlingly blue against his weathered face. "Name's Wade Fletcher. Passed through and noticed your roof's about to give. Thought I might offer assistance." Ruby's pride bristled. "I can manage, Mr. Fletcher." His expression remained neutral. "No doubt. But that corner post is rotted clean through. First good rain's gonna bring the whole thing down." She knew he was right. The children would arrive tomorrow, and she had nowhere else to take them. "I have no money to pay for repairs," she admitted. A smile crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Wasn't asking for payment. I don't accept charity. Call it neighborly then." "We're not neighbors. I don't even know you." Wade Fletcher replaced his hat, squinting at the sun. "Just rode in from Wyoming, taking on work at the Carson Ranch starting next week. Got time to spare until then." He gestured to the cabin. And you look like you could use an extra set of hands." Ruby hesitated, weighing pride against necessity. The stagecoach would arrive tomorrow, bringing 4 children who deserved better than a roof that might collapse on their heads. "I need to unload these supplies," she said finally. "Then I can show you what needs fixing." Wade nodded, already moving to help with the wagon. "Expecting company?" he asked, noting the children's items among her purchases. "My sister's children," Ruby said, the words still raw in her throat. "They're orphaned now. Arriving tomorrow." Understanding dawned in his eyes, but he asked no questions, simply nodded and carried the heavier items into the cabin. Ruby followed, suddenly conscious of the cabin's sparse interior, the single bedroom she'd have to rearrange, the worn furnishings, the empty spaces where Thomas's belongings had once been. By late afternoon, Wade had assessed the cabin's most urgent needs. Roof needs new shingles on the south side. That corner post has to be replaced entirely. Windows need proper sealing before winter. Got a decent vegetable garden, but that fence won't keep critters out much longer. Ruby's shoulders sagged. "I've been trying to maintain it all, but it's too much for one person," Wade finished. "Even without young ones underfoot." He disappeared to his horse, returning with a canvas sack. When he opened it, Ruby saw an array of tools far better than the rusty implements Thomas had left behind. "Mr. Fletcher, Wade," he corrected. "I appreciate the assessment, but I can't accept more help without some way to repay you." He studied her for a moment, then said words that would change everything. "We share the load, Mrs. Vance. That's how folks survive out here. Today I help you, tomorrow you help someone else." That's the code of the West. Against her better judgment, Ruby nodded. "Until sunset, then." Wade worked steadily through the evening, replacing the rotted corner post while Ruby prepared a simple meal of beans and cornbread. When she called him in to eat, she noticed he'd not only fixed the immediate structural concern but had also patched 3 holes in the roof. "Thank you," she said, serving him a generous portion. "I'm Ruby, by the way, not Mrs. Vance anymore." "Your husband?" he asked quietly. Horse kicked him. "Last spring." She spoke matter-of-factly, the way she'd learned to when neighbors inquired. "We'd been here 2 years, barely getting by." Wade nodded, respecting her brevity. "My condolences." They ate in companionable silence, and when Wade rose to leave, he hesitated at the door. "I'll return tomorrow morning. Bring more supplies." Before Ruby could protest, he added, "Consider it an advance on my wages from Carson. I can spare it." The following morning dawned with Ruby already awake, having barely slept. She'd rearranged the cabin as best she could. Her bedroom now contained 2 small pallets for the youngest children, while she'd prepared space in the main room for the older ones. It was inadequate, but it was all she had. True to his word, Wade arrived shortly after sunrise, his horse pulling a small cart loaded with lumber, roofing materials, and a sack of tools. He set to work immediately, moving with the efficiency of a man accustomed to hard labor. "The stage arrives at noon," Ruby told him as she headed to the chicken coop. "I need to be in town by then." Wade nodded, already climbing onto the roof. "I'll keep working here. Should have the worst of it fixed by the time you return." The stagecoach arrived in a cloud of dust, right on schedule. Ruby stood nervously on the boardwalk, watching as the driver helped a young girl down, followed by an older boy who turned to assist 2 smaller children. "Ruby." The oldest girl stepped forward, her eyes so like her mother's searching Ruby's face. "I'm Emma. These are James, Lily, and Samuel." Ruby knelt before them, opening her arms. "I'm your Aunt Ruby. Your mama was my sister." Emma, 10 years old and already carrying the weight of responsibility on her thin shoulders, remained stoic. James, 8, clutched a small wooden horse, eyes downcast. Lily, 5, buried her face in Emma's skirt, while 3-year-old Samuel stared openly, thumb in mouth. "You're coming home with me," Ruby said gently. "I've prepared a place for you." "They've been through hell, madam," the stagecoach driver said quietly as he handed down their meager belongings, one trunk containing all that remained of their former life. Parents gone within days of each other. Neighbors looked after them until arrangements could be made. Ruby nodded, her throat tight. "Thank you for bringing them safely." The journey back to the homestead was quiet, broken only by Samuel's occasional questions and Ruby's gentle answers. As they approached the cabin, she felt a flutter of anxiety. What would they think of this humble place? What would they think of the strange man working on their roof? Wade was hammering the last of the new shingles when they arrived. He climbed down as the wagon approached, wiping his hands on a rag tucked into his belt. "Children," Ruby said, helping them down, "this is Mr. Fletcher. He's been kind enough to help repair our home." Wade tipped his hat. "Pleasure to meet you all." Emma studied him suspiciously, while James's attention was caught by Wade's toolbox. "Are you a carpenter?" the boy asked, his first word since arriving. Wade smiled. "Just a cowboy who knows his way around a hammer. Would you like to help me finish up?" James glanced at Ruby, who nodded encouragingly. A tentative smile broke across the boy's face as he followed Wade to the woodpile. Emma helped Ruby unload their belongings while Lily and Samuel explored the chicken coop with wide-eyed fascination. "Is he your beau?" Emma asked bluntly when the others were out of earshot. Ruby nearly dropped the trunk. "No, he's just passing through, offered to help with the repairs." Emma's eyes, far too knowing for a child, studied Ruby's face. "Mama said you were alone out here since Uncle Thomas died." "I manage," Ruby said, the familiar phrase tasting bitter now. "We won't be a burden," Emma promised fiercely. "I can cook and clean and watch the little ones. James is strong for his age. We'll help." Ruby's heart broke at the child's determination. She knelt before her niece, taking her hands. "Emma, listen to me. You are not a burden. You are family. Yes, things will be tight, and yes, we'll all need to work together. But you're a child. Your job is to be a child for as long as you can." Tears filled Emma's eyes before she blinked them away. "I haven't been a child since Mama took sick." Ruby pulled her close, feeling the girl's rigid body gradually soften as she allowed herself, for just a moment, to be held. By evening, Wade had repaired the roof, fixed the sagging front step, and enlisted James's help in reinforcing the chicken coop. Ruby served a dinner of chicken stew, their best hen sacrificed to welcome the children, and fresh bread Martha Jenkins had sent along when she heard the news. "Will you stay for supper, Mr. Fletcher?" Ruby asked, aware of Emma's watchful gaze. Wade glanced at the children gathered around the table. "I'd be honored if there's enough." "There's always enough to share," Ruby said, the generosity of her words surprising her. Perhaps it was Wade's example that prompted them, his willingness to give without expectation of return. After dinner, Wade surprised them all by producing a harmonica from his pocket. As twilight deepened outside, he played soft, familiar tunes that gradually drew smiles from the children. Even little Samuel, who had barely left Ruby's side all day, edged closer to watch Wade's fingers move across the instrument. When the youngest children's eyes grew heavy, Ruby ushered them to bed. Wade took his leave, pausing at the door. "I'll return tomorrow," he said. "That garden fence won't build itself." "You've done more than enough," Ruby protested. Wade looked past her to where James was showing Emma how to use a small hammer Wade had given him. "Those children need stability, security." His eyes met hers. "We share the load, remember." After he left, Ruby sat alone by the fire, the children finally asleep. Emma and Lily shared her bed while James and Samuel slept on pallets nearby. The cabin felt different, fuller, warmer despite its shortcomings. Yet worry gnawed at her. The flour wouldn't last the month. The garden wasn't producing enough to feed 5 mouths. Winter loomed ahead, merciless and unforgiving in these parts. And while Wade's repairs were a blessing, they were just the beginning of what needed to be done. She was startled from her thoughts by a soft knock at the door. Opening it cautiously, she found Wade standing there, hat in hand. "Forgot to mention," he said quietly, "Carson Ranch needs eggs. If you've got chickens to spare, they'll pay fair price. Thought maybe the children could help with that, give them purpose while earning their keep." Relief flooded through Ruby. "That would help tremendously." Wade nodded, then hesitated. In the moonlight, his features seemed softer, uncertain. "Ruby, I know we're strangers still, but those children need more than just a roof. They need—" He gestured vaguely. "A man's influence." Ruby supplied, a hint of defensiveness creeping into her tone. "A community," Wade corrected gently. "No one makes it alone out here, not even the strongest among us." Before she could respond, he replaced his hat. "Sleep well, Ruby Vance. Tomorrow brings new challenges." As he walked away, Ruby stood in the doorway longer than necessary, watching his tall figure disappear into the darkness. True to his word, Wade returned the next morning and the morning after that. As September ripened toward harvest, he became a fixture at the homestead, arriving early, working through the day, taking meals with them before returning to his lodgings in town. Ruby's initial wariness gradually gave way to gratitude, then to something deeper she wasn't ready to name. The children blossomed under the stability of routine. James shadowed Wade constantly, soaking up knowledge about tools and repairs. Emma, though initially suspicious, came to appreciate the way Wade addressed her with respect, seeking her input on household matters. Even little Samuel, who spoke rarely, began to toddle after Wade, mimicking his movements with solemn concentration. Lily appointed herself Wade's special helper, carrying nails and holding the end of the measuring string, her giggles filling the air when he pretended she was the strongest girl in Idaho. One evening, as Wade prepared to leave, Ruby walked him to his horse. "You start at Carson Ranch tomorrow," she said. Remembering his earlier words, Wade nodded, adjusting his saddle. "I'll be working sunup to sundown for a spell, but I'll still come by when I can." "You don't have to," Ruby said, though the thought of his absence created an unexpected hollow in her chest. Wade turned to face her, his expression serious in the fading light. "I know I don't have to, I want to." "Why?" The question escaped before she could reconsider it. For a moment he was silent, his eyes searching hers. "Because in all my years of drifting I've never felt as right as I do helping you and those children." The honesty of his words stripped away her practiced defenses. "The children have come to depend on you, just the children." He asked softly. Ruby looked away, unwilling to acknowledge how central Wade had become to her own sense of stability. "We're managing better now, thanks to your help. The egg arrangement with Carson Ranch helps tremendously." Wade accepted her deflection with a nod. "I'll speak with Mr. Carson about your wheat harvest. He might lend equipment, maybe even men to help bring it in." "I couldn't ask. You're not asking. I am." Wade mounted his horse. "We share the load, Ruby. Remember." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Wade's work at Carson Ranch kept him away until evening, but he still appeared like clockwork as dusk settled, often bringing supplies, sometimes accompanied by one of Carson's ranch hands who'd volunteered additional help. The wheat harvest came in better than Ruby had dared hope, thanks to the additional hands and borrowed equipment. For the first time since Thomas's death, Ruby found herself with a surplus enough to pay down her debts at Jenkins' store and put aside seed for spring planting. October brought cooling temperatures and preparations for winter. Wade and James built proper beds for the children, while Emma helped Ruby preserve garden vegetables and wild berries. The egg business thrived, with Carson Ranch now taking all they could produce and paying fairly. It was during this time that Ruby began to notice subtle changes in herself. She laughed more easily. She planned for the future with hope rather than dread. She found herself humming as she worked, watching the road for Wade's approach each evening. Emma noticed too. "You like Mr. Fletcher," she said one afternoon as they kneaded bread dough together. Ruby's hands stilled. "He's been very helpful to us." Emma rolled her eyes with all the drama of pre-adolescence. "Not like that, you like him." Heat rose to Ruby's cheeks. "That's not appropriate conversation, young lady." "Mama always said life's too short not to speak truth," Emma persisted. "And the truth is, you watch for him. Your voice changes when you talk to him, and you wear your hair different when you know he's coming." Ruby resumed kneading with unnecessary vigor. "Mr. Fletcher is a kind man who's helped us through a difficult time. That's all." Emma sighed with exaggerated patience. "He likes you too, you know. James says he asks about you all the time when they're working." Despite herself, Ruby asked, "What does he ask?" Emma's triumphant smile was answer enough. That evening, Wade arrived with news. "First snow's coming. Carson's men saw the signs up north." He glanced around the cozy cabin, now much improved from when he'd first encountered it. "You'll be warm enough with the new insulation and chimney repairs." "Thanks to you," Ruby acknowledged. Wade shrugged off the gratitude. "There's something else." He hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. "Carson's offered me the foreman position, permanent." Ruby's heart leapt before she could temper her reaction. "You're staying in Malad City, thinking on it." His eyes held hers. "Would like your opinion on the matter." Before Ruby could respond, Samuel barreled into Wade's legs, arms upraised in silent demand. Without hesitation, Wade swung the boy up onto his shoulders, causing peals of delighted laughter. "Horse ride," Samuel commanded, one of his rare full sentences. "Hold tight, pardner," Wade cautioned, trotting around the room while making exaggerated horse sounds. Ruby watched them, emotion tightening her throat. In just 2 months, Wade had become essential to them all, not just for his labor or provisions, but for his steady presence, his quiet strength, his ability to make her children, for she thought of them as hers now, feel secure in a world that had already taken too much from them. Later, after the children were asleep, Ruby and Wade sat by the fire. The first hints of snowfall drifted past the windows, transforming the world outside into a hushed wonderland. "You should take Carson's offer," Ruby said finally. "Foreman's a good position." Wade nodded, poking at the fire. "Comes with the old Sullivan cabin on the north property. Carson's had it fixed up proper. 2 bedrooms, good roof, solid foundation." "Sounds ideal for a single man," Ruby said, trying to ignore the pain that accompanied the words. "Too big for just one person." Wade set the poker aside, turning to face her fully. "Ruby, I've been thinking," her pulse quickened at his serious tone. "About us, you, me, the children." He took a deep breath. "I know it's forward of me, we've only known each other 2 months. But I've lived enough years to recognize what matters when I find it." Ruby's hands trembled in her lap. "What are you saying, Wade?" "I'm saying I care for you, for those children. I'm saying this, what we've built here feels like what I've been searching for without knowing it." His eyes, earnest and vulnerable, held hers. "I'm saying I'd like your permission to court you properly with the intention of making a life together." The room seemed suddenly airless. "Wade, you don't need to answer now," he said quickly. "I know it's sudden. I know you're still healing from loss. I know the children come first in your heart, as they should." "It's not that," Ruby said, finding her voice. I've been alone so long, made all the decisions, carried all the weight. I'm not sure I remember how to share more than just labor. Wade smiled gently. Seems to me you've been sharing plenty. Your home, your table, your family. He reached across the space between them, his calloused hand covering hers. I'm not Thomas, I won't try to be, but I'd like the chance to be something new, something that works for all of us. Outside, the snow fell harder, casting the cabin in a cocoon of white silence. Ruby stared at their joined hands, feeling the strength and gentleness in Wade's touch. The children adore you, she said softly, and I them. But it's you, Ruby Vance, who's captured my heart most completely. Ruby looked up, seeing the truth written plainly on his face. Something long dormant stirred within her: hope, desire, possibility. Yes, she whispered. Yes, you may court me, Wade Fletcher. His smile could have lit the darkest night. Slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished, he leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to her cheek. That's enough to carry me through winter and beyond, he said, his voice rough with emotion. As promised, the snow arrived in earnest overnight. Ruby woke to find the world transformed. Drifts piled against the cabin walls, trees bent under the weight of early winter. The children exclaimed in delight, pressing faces to frosted window panes. Will Mr. Fletcher come today? Lily asked, her breath fogging the glass. The snow's awfully deep, Ruby cautioned, unwilling to promise what might be impossible. James scoffed with newfound masculine authority. Course he'll come. He promised to show me how to set rabbit snares today. Emma caught Ruby's eye with a knowing look that made her blush and turn away. By mid-morning, Ruby had resigned herself to Wade's absence. The snow continued falling, the path to town surely impassable now. She was teaching the children a counting game when barking announced visitors. It's him, James cried, rushing to the window. And he's got a sleigh. Sure enough, Wade approached through the snow, driving a small sleigh pulled by two sturdy horses. Behind him, the sleigh was loaded with supplies and what appeared to be small pieces of furniture. The children tumbled outside, heedless of the cold in their excitement. Ruby followed more sedately, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. Wade reined the horses to a stop, his face red with cold but his eyes bright with pleasure. Told Carson I needed the day, he called over the children's excited chatter. Thought you might need provisions. And what's all this? Ruby asked, gesturing to the items in the sleigh. Wade climbed down, stamping snow from his boots. Housewarming gifts, Carson's wife insisted. He lowered his voice as he approached Ruby. Actually, I might have mentioned my intentions toward a certain widow with 4 young ones. Mrs. Carson took it upon herself to outfit you with some comforts. Ruby's eyes widened as she surveyed the bounty: a proper rocking chair, children's books, warm blankets, a set of carved wooden animals that Samuel was already reaching for. This is too much, she protested. Wade shook his head. Community, remember. Carson's wife had 6 children of her own, all grown now. These things were gathering dust. He took her gloved hands in his. Besides, a lady being courted should have a proper chair to sit in while her suitor comes calling. The children, who had been unloading the sleigh with enthusiastic efficiency, froze at his words. Courting, Emma repeated, her eyes huge. You're courting Aunt Ruby. Wade looked to Ruby, silently asking permission to answer. At her nod, he turned to the children with solemn respect. With your aunt's permission, yes. And I'd like yours as well, since we'd be a family if things progress as I hope they might. James frowned in confusion. You mean you'd be our uncle? Something like that, Wade agreed. Emma, ever practical, asked, would we live here or at your new cabin? That would be for your aunt to decide, Wade answered. And you children too. Whatever makes most sense for all of us. Samuel, who had been examining the wooden horse Wade brought, suddenly approached and thrust it toward him. "For me?" he asked. Wade knelt in the snow, bringing himself to the boy's level. "Yes, Samuel, for you." The child studied him with solemn eyes, then unexpectedly threw his arms around Wade's neck. "Stay," he commanded. "Stay with us." Over the boy's shoulder, Wade's eyes met Ruby's, the question clear in them. Ruby felt tears prick her eyes at the tenderness in his gaze, the careful way he held Samuel, the moment of perfect rightness that settled over her homestead. "Let's get these things inside before they're buried in snow," she said, her voice unsteady with emotion. The early winter storm kept them snowbound for 3 days. Wade slept in the lean-to attached to the barn, insisting it was perfectly comfortable despite Ruby's concerns. During daylight hours, he taught James to set snares, played games with the girls, and told Samuel stories that had the little boy giggling helplessly. In the evenings, after the children were asleep, Wade and Ruby sat before the fire, talking in low voices about their pasts, their hopes, the practical considerations of joining their lives. "Carson says I can work the Sullivan property as my own, alongside my foreman duties," Wade explained on the third night. "It's good land, 40 acres already cleared, a natural spring running through it." "What would happen to this homestead?" Ruby asked. "Thomas and I put everything into claiming it. We could work both," Wade suggested. "Your wheat field's producing well now. My land's better suited for cattle. Between the two, we'd have security." The easy way he said "we" warmed Ruby through. It had been so long since she'd been part of a "we" that the concept felt both foreign and achingly familiar. "And the children's education," she pressed. "Emma especially is bright. She deserves schooling." Carson's wife mentioned a new teacher coming in spring. Meanwhile, Mrs. Carson herself was a schoolteacher back east. She's offered to tutor the older ones through winter. Ruby shook her head in wonder. "You've thought of everything." Wade reached for her hand, his touch still sending ripples of awareness through her. "I want to do this right, Ruby. I want you to know I'm not just caught up in the moment. I'm thinking of our future, all 6 of us." "6," Ruby repeated softly. "A family." Wade's thumb traced circles on her palm. "My parents died when I was 14. Been drifting since then, ranch to ranch, territory to territory. Never found a place that felt like home." His eyes, reflecting firelight, held hers. "Until now." On impulse, Ruby leaned forward and pressed her lips to her first kiss since Thomas, her first step toward a new life. Wade's surprise lasted only an instant before he responded, his hand cupping her cheek with such gentleness that tears sprang to her eyes. When they separated, both were breathing unevenly. Wade's forehead rested against hers, his eyes closed as if memorizing the moment. "I think that's a yes to my courting," he murmured, a smile in his voice. Ruby laughed softly. "A definite yes." The snow stopped on the 4th day, and the difficult work of clearing paths began. Wade and James worked side by side, shoveling from cabin to barn, then widening the trail toward town. Ruby watched from the doorway, her heart full as she observed the easy camaraderie between them. Emma joined her, arms slipping around Ruby's waist. "He's good for us," the girl said, sounding far older than her 10 years. Ruby hugged her niece close. "I think so too. Mama would approve," Emma continued. "She always said you deserved someone who could match your strength." Ruby blinked back tears. "Your mother was very wise." "So are you going to marry him?" Emma asked bluntly. "Emma, we've only just begun courting." The girl rolled her eyes. "Adults make everything so complicated. You love him. He loves you. We all love him. What's there to wait for?" Out in the yard, Wade had hoisted Samuel onto his shoulders, allowing the boy to help with the shoveling while James laughed at their antics. Lily had ventured out too, attempting to build a snowman with more enthusiasm than skill. Wade paused in his work to shape the snow properly for her, his patience evident even from a distance. "Sometimes," Ruby said softly, "the best decisions take time to be certain." Emma sighed dramatically. "If you say so, but don't take too long, he might get away." Ruby smiled, watching Wade demonstrate proper snowball technique to her enraptured nieces and nephews. "I don't think that's going to happen." As winter settled over Malad City, a rhythm developed. Wade divided his time between Carson Ranch duties and the homestead, often bringing news, supplies, and the occasional treat for the children. True to her word, Mrs. Carson began tutoring Emma and James twice weekly, with Wade transporting them to and from the ranch on those days. Ruby's egg business expanded, with a merchant in town now purchasing them for resale alongside Carson Ranch's orders. The additional income allowed her to buy fabric for new winter clothing, books for the children, and even small Christmas gifts hidden away for the approaching holiday. Through it all, Wade courted Ruby with respectful determination. He brought wildflower honey from a beekeeper near the ranch. He carved a delicate wooden hairpin that Ruby wore proudly. He listened to her dreams and fears with equal attention, never dismissing either. By December, the question wasn't if they would marry, but when. "Spring," Wade suggested one evening as they sat on the porch despite the cold, bundled in blankets and watching stars emerge above the snow-covered landscape. After the thaw, before planting. Ruby considered this. "That seems sensible. Gives the children more time to adjust to the idea," Wade chuckled. "Ruby, those children have been planning our wedding since November. James asked if he could call me Pa yesterday." Her eyes widened. "What did you say?" "Said I'd be honored, but we should wait until it's official." He took her hand within the folds of the blanket. "What's really troubling you, Ruby? If it's too soon—" "It's not that," she interrupted. "It's— marriage means changes. Moving, perhaps. New routines for the children. They've had so much upheaval already." Wade was quiet for a moment, considering her words. "What if we didn't change anything right away? What if I moved in here after the wedding, worked both properties as planned, but kept the children's lives as stable as possible until summer?" Ruby studied his face in the faint light from the cabin windows. "You do that. Delay moving to your own property." "It's not the property that matters to me, Ruby. It's the people I share it with." He smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "Besides, Sullivan's cabin isn't going anywhere. Carson's holding it regardless." Ruby felt a wave of gratitude so intense it nearly overwhelmed her. This was what had been missing with Thomas, for all that she'd loved him, this sense of partnership, of decisions made together with all concerns weighed equally. "April," she said decisively. "When the wildflowers bloom on the hillside." Wade's smile was brighter than the emerging stars. "April it is." Christmas came with unexpected joys. The children woke to stockings filled with oranges, candy sticks, and small wooden toys Wade had carved in secret hours. Ruby received a beautiful woolen shawl from Mrs. Carson, and from Wade, a silver locket containing a small family portrait. The six of them posed before the cabin on a clear day when a traveling photographer had passed through town. "How did you arrange this?" Ruby gasped, opening the locket to find their faces smiling back at her. Wade looked pleased with himself. "Carson mentioned the photographer was heading to Malad City. I rode out early and convinced him to make a detour." Ruby traced the tiny faces with her fingertip. "It's perfect." "I never thought," she stopped, emotion threatening to overwhelm her. Wade understood without further explanation. "You never thought you'd have a family portrait again?" She nodded, unable to speak. There'll be many more, he promised, as our family grows and changes. Ruby gave him his gift, then a hand-knitted scarf in deep blue that matched his eyes, and a framed sampler Emma had helped her stitch that read "Home is where we share the load." Wade's eyes grew suspiciously bright as he ran his fingers over the careful stitches. "This is coming with us wherever we go," he declared, his voice rough, "to remind us how we began." New Year arrived with renewed purpose. The engagement was announced formally at Carson Ranch's celebration, met with enthusiastic approval from the community that had watched their courtship unfold. Mrs. Carson immediately appointed herself wedding coordinator, while Mr. Carson offered the ranch's grand parlor for the ceremony. "Your family now," he told Wade gruffly when the younger man tried to protest the generosity. "And family takes care of its own." January and February passed in a blur of preparations, both for the wedding and spring planting. Wade and Ruby spent long evenings planning their future, which fields to plant, whether to invest in more chickens or perhaps dairy cows, how to expand the Sullivan cabin to comfortably accommodate all of them when they eventually moved. "I'm thinking we might use this homestead as a second income source," Wade mused one evening as they pored over crude maps of both properties. "The soil's right for wheat. Sullivan land's better for livestock." Ruby nodded, appreciating his practical approach. "We could hire help during harvest. The profit would justify it now. And the children could divide their time between properties as they grow, learn both skills." He glanced at her. "Our children too, if we're blessed that way." The thought of having a child with Wade, of expanding their already full home with new life, sent a pleasant warmth through Ruby. "I'd like that," she admitted, "though perhaps not right away." Wade smiled understandingly. "One step at a time." March arrived with warming temperatures and muddy roads. The snow receded gradually, revealing the first hints of green beneath. Wade divided his time between ranch duties and preparations at the Sullivan cabin, determined to have it ready as a second home by summer. "James is asking to come with me to the Sullivan property tomorrow," he told Ruby one evening. "Thought I might take him, show him around. Carson's given me the day." Ruby hesitated, maternal instinct warring with recognition of James's growing independence. "The roads are still difficult." "We'll take it slow," Wade promised. "Thought it might be good for him. Man-to-man time." Ruby relented, recognizing Wade's genuine desire to bond with the boy who increasingly looked to him for guidance. "Be careful with him." The next evening, James returned full of excited descriptions of their other home, as he called it. "Wade says I can have my own room there, and he's going to teach me to ride properly this summer. And there's a stream with fish and space for a vegetable garden twice the size of ours. And breathe, James," Ruby laughed, tousling his hair. "It sounds wonderful." "It's not finished yet," Wade cautioned, hanging his coat by the door. "Needs a woman's touch." His eyes met Ruby's across the room, and the promise in them sent heat rising to her cheeks. As April approached, Ruby found herself torn between excitement and nostalgia. This homestead, for all its hardships, had been her last connection to Thomas. Marrying Wade, eventually moving to the Sullivan property, these steps forward meant leaving pieces of her past behind. Wade, ever sensitive to her moods, found her one evening staring at the crude cross marking Thomas's grave on the hillside behind the cabin. "We don't have to leave here," he said quietly, coming to stand beside her. "If it means too much to you." Ruby shook her head. "It's not that. Thomas would want me to move forward, to do what's best for the children." She looked up at Wade, the setting sun gilding his features. "For all of us." "We could move his marker," Wade suggested, "to the Sullivan property, keep him close." The thoughtfulness of the offer brought tears to Ruby's eyes. You wouldn't mind. He was your husband, the children's uncle, part of who you are. Wade took her hand. I'm not trying to erase what came before, Ruby. Just add to your story. Ruby leaned against him, feeling his arm encircle her shoulders. How did I get so fortunate to find you, Wade Fletcher? He pressed a kiss to her temple. I ask myself the same question every day about you. The wedding day dawned clear and mild. The hillsides surrounding Carson Ranch dusted with early wildflowers just as Ruby had hoped. Mrs. Carson had transformed the ranch parlor with ribbon streamers and fresh blossoms, while the ranch hands had constructed long tables outside for the celebration to follow. Emma and Lily, dressed in matching blue frocks Ruby had sewn for the occasion, took their duties as flower bearers with solemn importance. James stood proudly beside Wade, chest puffed out in his new suit, the wedding rings secured carefully in his pocket. Even Samuel managed to remain reasonably clean in his new shirt, though Mrs. Carson wisely assigned a maid to keep him entertained during the ceremony. Ruby wore a simple gown of cream-colored silk, a gift from the Carson family that had left her speechless when presented. Her hair was adorned with wildflowers, her mother's pearl earrings her only jewelry besides the locket Wade had given her at Christmas. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," Wade murmured when she joined him before the traveling minister who'd come specially from Boise. Ruby's cheeks warmed at the naked adoration in his eyes. "And you're the answer to prayers I didn't know to make." The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. Wade's vows, spoken in his deep, steady voice, brought tears to Ruby's eyes and more than a few of the assembled guests. Ruby's response, though quieter, carried clear conviction that caused Wade to tighten his grip on her hands. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Wade's kiss was gentle but thorough enough to elicit a whoop from Carson's ranch hands and a scandalized giggle from Lily. The celebration lasted well into evening, with music, dancing, and more food than Ruby had seen in one place since leaving the East. The children grew increasingly excited as their bedtime approached and passed without mention, though Samuel eventually fell asleep in Carson's big armchair, thumb firmly in mouth. As the festivities wound down, Wade led Ruby aside, away from the lantern light and music. In the soft spring darkness, he took both her hands in his. "Happy, Mrs. Fletcher?" he asked, his voice husky with emotion. The name, her new name, sent a thrill through Ruby. "Happier than I ever thought possible again," she admitted. "The children, too, I think." He nodded toward where Emma and Lily were attempting to teach a very patient ranch hand a complicated clapping game, while James proudly showed off his new pocket knife to an admiring audience. "They've come so far," Ruby marveled. When they first arrived, Emma wouldn't smile, James barely spoke, Lily had nightmares. "And now look at them, thriving." Wade drew her closer. "That's your doing, Ruby." "Ours," she corrected. "Ever since you walked up to my sagging cabin and said, 'We share the load.'" They finished together, smiling at the memory. Wade kissed her again, slower and more thoroughly than propriety strictly allowed. When they parted, both were breathing unevenly. "Carson's given us the guest cabin for tonight," Wade murmured against her ear. "Said he'd keep the children at the main house until morning." Heat bloomed low in Ruby's belly at the implication. "That's very thoughtful of him." Wade's chuckle vibrated against her skin. "I might have requested the arrangement." Later, in the privacy of the guest cabin, Ruby stood nervously as Wade lit the lamps. Despite her previous marriage, she felt like a bride in truth, uncertain yet eager, vulnerable yet safe in the knowledge of Wade's gentle nature. "We have all the time in the world," Wade said softly, reading her anxiety. "Nothing needs to happen tonight that you're not ready for." Ruby stepped toward him, her heart full to bursting with love for this man who consistently put her needs before his own. "I'm ready to be your wife in every way, Wade Fletcher." His smile in response held such joy that Ruby felt answering happiness rise within her. As he drew her into his arms, she knew with absolute certainty that this man, these children, this life they were building together was precisely where she belonged. Epilogue: 5 years later, the summer sun beat down on the Sullivan Vance homestead, as Ruby shaded her eyes, watching the approaching wagon. Wade's tall figure was visible on the driver's seat, with 13-year-old James riding alongside on his own horse, a gift for his recent birthday that the boy treasured above all possessions. "They're back," Ruby called toward the house. Emma, now 15 and blossoming into a young lady, emerged wiping flour from her hands. "Did they get everything from town? We'll know soon enough." Ruby smiled, one hand resting on her swollen belly where their second child grew steadily beneath her heart. The first, 3-year-old Thomas Wade Fletcher, came barreling around the corner of the house, wooden horse in hand. "Papa!" he shrieked, spotting the wagon. "Careful, Tommy," Ruby cautioned, though she made no move to restrain his exuberance. At the door behind Emma, 8-year-old Samuel and 10-year-old Lily appeared, equally excited by the return of the men of the family. The past 5 years had transformed both properties beyond recognition. The original homestead now served primarily for wheat farming, overseen by a capable foreman, while Wade managed the livestock operation at the expanded Sullivan property. The cabin there had been enlarged to a proper house with bedrooms for all, a spacious kitchen where Ruby taught Emma the finer points of cooking, and a wide porch where the family gathered on summer evenings. Emma was showing remarkable aptitude for teaching, assisting at the new Malad City School during winter months. James, tall and lanky like his adoptive father, had developed Wade's way with animals and dreamed of expanding their cattle operation. Lily showed artistic talent that Mrs. Carson was nurturing with proper supplies and instruction, while Samuel, no longer the silent toddler, chattered constantly and displayed a mind for figures that suggested a future in business. The wagon pulled to a stop, and Wade jumped down, immediately swept up in Tommy's enthusiastic greeting. James dismounted more sedately, though his grin revealed boyish excitement as he led his horse to the water trough. "Success?" Ruby asked as Wade approached, Tommy now perched on his shoulders. "Complete success," Wade confirmed, bending awkwardly to kiss her. "Got everything on your list, plus a surprise." He turned to Emma. "Martha Jenkins says to tell you she's set aside that bolt of blue fabric you admired, said it would make a fine dress for the harvest dance." Emma blushed pleasantly. "Thank you for asking her." And Wade continued, addressing Lily and Samuel, "There might be packages in that wagon with your names on them. James knows which ones." The younger children raced to the wagon where James was already unloading, their excited voices carrying across the yard. Wade set Tommy down to join them, then turned to Ruby, his hands gently cradling her rounded belly. "How are you feeling today?" "Strong as a horse," Ruby assured him. "Though your daughter is determined to make her presence known at all hours," Wade's eyes crinkled. "Still certain it's a girl?" "Emma and I both think so. Mother's intuition." He kissed her again, lingering this time. "I missed you, even just overnight." Ruby leaned into his solid strength, marveling at how love had continued to deepen between them over the years. "We missed you too. The bed's too empty without you." Wade's eyes darkened at her words. "I'll remedy that tonight." They were interrupted by Tommy's return, clutching a small wooden train. "Look, Mama, Papa brought me a train. It's beautiful," Ruby agreed, kneeling despite her awkward shape to admire the toy. "What do you say to Papa?" "Thank you," Tommy flung himself at Wade's legs, then ran off again to show his siblings his treasure. Wade helped Ruby straighten, his hand remaining supportively at her back. "Carson asked after you. Said Mrs. Carson is planning a basket of baby things." "She's too generous," Ruby protested, though she was touched by the continued kindness of the woman who had become a dear friend. "She says it's selfish, really. Gives her excuse to make baby clothes now that her grandchildren are growing too fast for her to keep up." Wade guided Ruby toward the porch steps. "Sit a spell. James and I will unload." Ruby obeyed, grateful for the shade and the chance to observe her family at work. James directed his younger siblings in carrying smaller packages while he and Wade handled the heavier supplies. Even Tommy was given a small sack of candy to carry, his serious expression as he concentrated on not dropping it bringing a smile to Ruby's lips. This was what Wade had given her, not just his love and partnership, but the ability to build something larger than herself. A family that worked together, grew together, shared the load in ways large and small. As if sensing her thoughts, Wade glanced up from the wagon, his smile containing all the promises he'd kept and those yet to fulfill. Ruby returned it, her hand resting on the new life they'd created, her heart full of gratitude for the day a dusty cowboy had arrived at her struggling homestead and changed everything with 6 simple words. "We share the load, Mrs. Vance." And share it they had, through harvests and blizzards, through childbirth and childhood illnesses, through the 1,000 daily challenges of carving a life from the wild Idaho territory. Together, they had transformed 2 separate properties into one thriving operation, 4 orphaned children and 2 lonely adults into a family, bound by choice as much as circumstance. As the summer evening settled around them, the family gathered on the porch steps, Emma with her needlework, James whittling a new creation, Lily sketching in the book Wade had brought her from town, Samuel explaining a complex calculation to anyone who would listen, Tommy drowsing in Ruby's lap. Wade's arm draped around Ruby's shoulders, his free hand occasionally reaching to feel his unborn child's movements. Ruby leaned against her husband's solid strength, watching the sunset paint the fields and pastures in gold. Their land, their legacy, their shared load made lighter by love.